Hi, I'm Michelle Clendenning, Executive Director of Self-Directed Services. I'm here to discuss with you the importance of protection from abuse, neglect, exploitation, and mistreatment. So first off, I want to make you all aware that as an LPG employee, we are all mandatory reporters if you suspect a person is or has been abused, neglected, exploited, or mistreated. Let's talk about the who. A study completed in 2012 by a well-known researcher found 70% of the people surveyed reported they or a family member with a disability had been abused. Most have been a victim on several occasions. A person with a disability is more likely to be abused by someone they know, someone that's close with them, a family member, rather than a stranger. Perpetrators often misuse position of trust or take advantage of a victim with actual or perceived vulnerabilities. Women with disabilities are assaulted, raped, and abused at a rate 2 times greater than women without a disability. Who do you support that may be at most risk for being abused? People who do not communicate verbally or have impaired speech, people who are immobile or non-ambulatory, people who are isolated, have no family members, guardians, or advocates in their life. So let's talk about abuse, neglect, exploitation, mistreatment. Abuse is physical, sexual, verbal, or emotional. It's an act of physical or mental mistreatment or injury that harms or threatens a person through action or inaction by another individual. Some signs of abuse are suspicious bruising, unexplained depression or anxiety, or possible changes in someone's behavior. Neglect is the deprivation of care and support. It's a pattern of conduct resulting in deprivation of care necessary to maintain minimal physical and mental health. Neglect occurs when a caregiver does not provide enough care and support to meet the person's individual needs for physical and emotional well-being. Some signs of neglect would be sleeping on shift, uncleanliness, serious bed sores, unpaid bills, or neglecting supervision or support for a person. Exploitation. This is considered taking advantage of a person's resource or property for their own gain. Illegal or improper use of vulnerable person's resources for another person's profit or advantage. Exploitation may involve a vulnerable person's income, financial resources, or real property, obtaining money fraudulently, charging for services not provided, misuse of power of attorney, and emotional pressure to change over a will or sign over property. Some signs may be sudden change in a person's spending habits. Someone that may normally get $50 a week in spending money now has no money each week. That would be a sudden change in someone's spending habits. Unexplained loss of resources or valuables, or overdrawn accounts. These are just a few signs. There's many more. Mistreatment. Mistreatment is a general term for treating an individual badly with malicious intent. Mistreatment includes abuse, neglect, and exploitation, but also includes intentional restriction of an individual's basic human rights for security, safety, making decisions, participating in legal proceedings, and voting. Some signs for someone being mistreated would be a person who appears over or under medicated, a person whose caregiver abuses alcohol or is emotionally unstable, a person who has not permitted visitors or direct communication with others. Let's talk about the why. Here are some possible contributing factors. Sometimes it's a lack of awareness by a person to identify abuse, neglect, exploitation, or mistreatment. Some people that we support don't know the definitions of abuse, neglect, exploitation, mistreatment. There's social isolation via dependency, lack of services, or lack of involvement, caregiver stress or caregiver burnout, Personal problems from the abuser could also be the why or a contributing factor for abuse, neglect, exploitation, or mistreatment. So how does OPG prevent abuse, neglect, exploitation, mistreatment? OPG is a zero-tolerance organization. All allegations of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and mistreatment are reported to authorities like Adult Protective Services, Child Protective Services, or police. OPG Inc. screens all applicants for employment to verify that they have not committed a sex crime, a crime of exploitation of an endangered adult, a crime of failure to report battery, neglect, or exploitation of an endangered adult, a crime of failure to report abuse and neglect of a child, a theft crime, a crime of murder or involuntary manslaughter, felony battery, a felony offense relating to a controlled substance. OPG provides supervision of staff through announced and unannounced visits, as well as through regular review of documentation. All employees are provided with education and training to prevent abuse, neglect, exploitation, and mistreatment. All people supported are provided with education on the definition of signs of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and mistreatment at least once a year. Any allegation of abuse, neglect, exploitation, mistreatment by a staff member of OPG will result in the suspension of the staff member in an investigation occurring from a trained internal investigator. All of these allegations will be reported to Adult Protective Services, Child Protective Services, and/or police. Let's talk about how you can prevent abuse, neglect, exploitation, and mistreatment from happening. You need to constantly teach the person you're supporting about abuse, neglect, exploitation, and mistreatment. Discuss different forms of abuse and how it is not always about someone hitting you. Discuss how a person should respond if someone is being mean to them. Discuss why it's important to keep financial and medical information confidential. Inform the person that they can always talk to someone they trust. OPG, the police, their case manager, and anyone that could help them if something happened. Talk about hypothetical situations with the person and see how they would respond. Possible hypothetical situations could be if your staff asked you for some of your dinner, what would you do? If your staff started yelling at you for doing your dishes, what would you do? What if your boyfriend, girlfriend, or significant other started slapping and hitting you? What would you do and who would you tell? What if someone started to touch you inappropriately? What would you do? Would you tell someone? Who would you tell? What if your staff fell asleep while working with you? What would you do? What if someone called you and asked for your bank account information? What would you do? And who would you tell? Those are some hypothetical questions that can help guide your conversation with the person that you support. There are other ways to prevent abuse, neglect, and exploitation, mistreatment. Observe your surroundings to make sure that people are receiving adequate care and necessities. If there are low medical, food, and cleaning supplies, inform your supervisor or the appropriate person immediately to prevent neglect. Report any concerns that you have about structural issues, cleanliness concerns, or inadequate supplies in the home. Observe a person's interactions with others to ensure that they're not being financially exploited. If you are responsible for counting cash in a home, then do this each shift, at the beginning and at the end. Involve the person in their finances by counting their money with them, letting them know of their balance, and discussing purchases made or future purchases that want to be made. Let's talk about when you report. You report immediately. If you suspect that someone is being abused, neglected, exploited, or mistreated, then you need to report that immediately. The following slides provides direct guidance on who to report to. Your supervisor will follow the OPG internal investigation process. If the person is in immediate danger or you witness the abuse, call 911 immediately. If the allegation is about a staff member, please follow the flow chart on the screen. If you, the person you support, or any other person reports that a staff member has engaged in abuse, neglect, and exploitation, then you are required to follow OPG Inc.'s protocol. Please look at the slide with the diagram of what to do for an internal investigation.
The first part is when an incident is discovered or an allegation is received by an OPG Inc. employee. All staff in all departments are required to contact their direct supervisor immediately to let them know of the allegation so that the appropriate leader can conduct suspensions. If you have a licensure or a credential with additional reporting responsibilities, then you must file a report to APS, CPS, and retain a copy of the report or the case ID number to provide to the lead internal investigator. If you verbally spoke to APS on the phone, please write up what you discussed.
Your direct supervisor must contact the director or executive director over the department who employs the alleged perpetrator. The director or executive director will immediately suspend the staff member and activate the lead internal investigator. The lead internal investigator will write abuse incident report as soon as they are activated, file a report to APS or CPS, and then we'll proceed with the investigation. The investigation will occur with interviews of potential witnesses, the person making the allegation, the alleged perpetrator, and others that may be appropriate to speak with. The lead internal investigator will review documentation and other relevant physical evidence. The lead internal investigator will request signed and dated written statements from every person interviewed. During the investigation, the CEO or CSO may determine that it is important to bring other IST members in to provide support to the person. If so, they will determine the amount of information that is necessary to disclose to maintain the confidentiality of the investigation. The lead internal investigator will make a determination about substantiation and present this to the CEO, CSO, and executive director. The lead internal investigator will also complete a record of findings that summarizes all information. The CSO and CEO, in conjunction with the executive director, will determine all disciplinary or follow-up actions. So OPG's goal with prevention of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and mistreatment is to create a culture which supports prevention and detection of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and mistreatment. We are here to use approaches and practices that proactively facilitate the prevention and detection of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and mistreatment. And we have systematically organized, understood, and implemented approaches and practices throughout all levels of OPG Inc. We've discussed a lot today about the prevention of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and mistreatment. If you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out to your direct supervisor so we can address that immediately. Thank you.